So everybody's aware that we are recording. Let's see how this works. That's it. So recording is on. Just to a little bit of a housekeeping information for the attendees. So we should be having about 50 to 60 attendees today in the webinar. There were about 70 people who have registered. The attendees are usually muted, so there's no way they can interrupt the presentation from the panelists. However, I will allow the attendees to ask questions, and I will unmute each individual person that asks the questions to the Zoom key features on the bottom of your screen where you can ask the question. You can raise your hand and ask the question, and I will unmute you to ask the question one by one when the time comes. We are having 15 to 20 minutes presentation by each panelist, and then a 5 minutes Q&A at the end of each session, of each panelist. And then after we finish the very end, we will have a 10 minutes Q&A, a generic Q&A for any more questions to be asked. So I'll do the same thing. I will unmute you if you'd like to ask the question directly. And please be very brief in your asking the question and be very precise, so we can smoothly move on to the presentations and finish in time. Today we have 3 panelists. This is the 3rd webinar. They've all been successful so far. Natasha Allden from Multiply Global, Dinsley from NORSS, and then we have David Gallaher from Orbital Microsoft Systems, and myself as the host. In terms of the attendance, let's say registration to this webinar, we have 68 registrations of different countries. You'll see that the majority at the moment are from the UK, of course, because a lot of companies have registered. But we also have a few from Russia, from China as well, Australia, in fact, European, South Africa as well, UAE, and so on, USA as well, for companies from the United States. So in terms of how these companies and people are distributed in terms of their profession, we have 6 people from an intergovernmental organization like the ITU or the CPT, ECO, the European Communications Office from Denmark, for example, as well. About 5 people from consulting firms. A national alliance from Australia is present in our registration, and they're also present as well in the webinar itself. 44 companies, and then about 7 people from government sources or regulators, basically, and 4 people from university background. In terms of gender distribution, unfortunately, we are low in the female side. There's 13 misses into this registration, and 55 male who registered as well. We hope to make this a bit better in the future. Just to remind you that the next 6 weeks, we're gonna have the following dates and the companies presenting. The week number 5 on the 6th of May will actually be on the next day, on the 7th, because on the 6th of May there is another meeting which clashes with our webinar, and I was asked if we could do it the next day. So it will be on the 7th of May's webinar. You see we have booking until the beginning of June, and of course, if there are other companies interested in making a presentation or webinar presentation here, just contact me and I will add you into the list. We will be having an extraordinary webinar on a specific topic which we are, let's say, thinking about. I'm not going to tell you what it is at the moment, but I will send out the information as soon as possible. By around the middle of May, specific extraordinary webinar in a different date that's being prepared. I will inform you as soon as possible on that. Just the last slide here. We will be issuing the formal membership fees and the benefits before the end of this month, just for those who are interested to join the Alliance. Tomorrow, there is another webinar set up from the SSPI UK, the Satellite Professional International chapter of the UK. That will be on India space industry. Tomorrow, if you're interested to join this webinar, just send me an email, and I will add you to, and I will send you the invitation. But on Friday, there is a live stream conversation on the Hubble anniversary, 30th anniversary of the Hubble telescope. And this conversation is broadcasted live from the European Space Agency. Again, if you're interested to attend or receive this link, just send me an email, and I will forward it to you to join this live stream conversation. Thank you. We'll now start with the actual webinar. So let me just bear with me so that I can actually move into the actual screen. So Dinz, you can start. I'm gonna go on I'm already off the screen. Let me just check. Sorry. Dinz, can you help me with this? Do you see my screen still?
I can see your screen still. I can try and share my.
Yes, do that.
Oh no, it says I cannot start screen share until whilst you're sharing. So you should
All
be
right.
able to...
I did that now. Are you okay?
Yep, got it. Thank you.
You can start anytime you want then. Thank you.
Excellent. So I'm just sharing the screen now. Thank you very much, Tony. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I'd like to say thanks to Tony for affording us this opportunity to be able to do the webinars and to present to the community, particularly considering the fact that we're not traveling around as much as we were able to. Over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I shall just explain to you who Northern Space Security are, give you a little bit of background information on operations that occur in space, and a little bit of background on what we do and how we can potentially help you in your endeavors. We were founded in 2017, very much it was a pension plan of mine, actually. I came to the end of 32 years in the Royal Air Force, and I thought I'd do some part-time consultancy to top up my pension. And that is now a full-blown company of 8 employees, and we're, even during these interesting times, we're looking to expand by at least another 2 over the summer. And the whole idea of we've gone from being a consultancy company to being an analytical hub. We're project managers, we're risk managers, and the piece we're looking at is that big picture. Quite simply, we are space surveillance and tracking specialists. We are space situation awareness focused company, providing services across the sector and external to the sector as well. Our core experience comes at the military grade, so a number of us are ex-Royal Air Force or have worked for the Royal Air Force, and we have amongst the 8 of us more than 100 years of space surveillance and tracking experience. And we are now dedicated to what I class as the democratization of data of space. Recent decades have seen an evolution, some might even say a revolution, of the utilization of data from space, whether that's GNSS or Earth observation. But we are dedicated to leading the revolution for data of space. If any of you follow astronomical or satellite tweets, you will probably see there's been a lot of activity over recent months because of Starlink flying over. In fact, I was standing on in the backyard last night to see if I could see one of the latest 2 passes of Starlink last night. So the big question is, why does this have to remain behind the government firewall when actually you can stand in your backyard and watch the satellites overfly? And we're trying to push it so we understand more about what's happening in space, so that we can ensure the sustainability of space and move on to greater and bolder things with near Earth orbit and then deeper space exploration. We have a number of strategic partnerships. The first one I'd like to introduce you to are Exoanalytic Solutions, who are a US company. They are the global #1 collector and provider of data on objects above 8,000 kilometers and out to just beyond the geobelt. So they use optical sensors, but more about them later. I have a specific slide on them later. We're also working closely with Northumbria University. We have a European Regional Development Fund grant to support a PhD student on what we've labeled as the Space Law Games. And really that is a fusion of military grade wargaming and the moot court process to highlight the technological and legal requirements for future space traffic management. So we are putting a spotlight legally on the gaps to ensure that we get it right for the future. And noting from what Tony mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have a number of government and regulators that may be listening into this presentation. If you are, please do reach out. I won't be speaking specifically about the space law games today, but we'll be holding a regulators workshop webinar sometime in the not too distant future, and as much international involvement as possible will be greatly appreciated. And our final strategic partner is a company called Intelligence Fusion. Intelligence Fusion are a terrestrial intelligence gathering company based in Durham. And basically with them, we've stood up our operational footprint, which is known as NOAA, the NORSS Orbital Analyst Hive, preparing for the flood of small satellites that are going to be joining orbit over the coming years. They provide a key element to space situational awareness. Space situational awareness is made up of three major elements: space surveillance and tracking, understanding the space environment, i.e. space weather, and then finally an intelligence element, knowing what the people are doing and why they're doing it. And Intel Fusion provides that key terrestrial intelligence gathering link to support our development of the Hive. We have 3 offices at the moment. I began the company in 2017 to bring the space to the northeast of England, mainly because I'd spent a lot of my RAF career commuting away from home, and I wanted to bring my job to home. Within a year, we had a second office at Harwell, and that's where we actually have our what we class it as the Harwell Space Hub, but we actually have a demonstrator for the capability that we're able to leverage through exoanalytic solutions. And 3 months ago now, we stood up the Hive at the Durham office with Intel Fusion. Unfortunately, we're limited on travel, so that is stalling at the moment. Most of the work is being carried out at a distance, but that will become our major operational hub as travel limitations are lifted. So exoanalytic solutions, who are they and what do they do? Like I said, they are probably the #1 provider of data on objects above 8,000 kilometers. They have a network of 350 plus telescopes and cameras at the locations that are shown on the map there. They still have a number of planned sites under development, and they have a huge database of object behavior going back 7 years. So they began operations officially in 2017, and they've built up this phenomenal database that is gathering information all the time. The global spread of the sensors is such so that they can elude as much as possible the 2 threats of any optical sensor that's based on the Earth, and that is sun exclusion, which is the key enemy of optical support tracking satellites, and of course weather as well. So the east-west distribution to stay ahead of or keep behind the sun, and the north-south distribution to hopefully beat any weather issues and to be able to gather data on all objects. They have near persistent custody of objects that are above 8,000 kilometers in space. And I will challenge anybody else to be able to compete with that because it is that sheer distribution of sensors that creates that capability. So just a bit of understanding of the space picture, just so that you know where we're coming from. Currently, the US space catalog, the spacetrack.org, provided by the 18th Space Control Squadron, is cataloging something in the region of about 20,600 known objects above 10 centimeters in size. I put them down as approximations because A, the actual spacetrack catalog isn't quite clear, and B, they don't necessarily show every single object in space that they can see, and some of that is because of the military firewall. Of those 20,000 catalog objects above 10 centimeters in size, only approximately 2,300 of which are actually active satellites. And I'll let you think on that, and if plans go well today, there will be another 60 added to that by Elon Musk by about 8 p.m. this evening. The spread is across multiple orbital regimes. Low Earth orbit is up to 2,000 kilometers in altitude, medium Earth orbit between 2,000 and 36,000 kilometers, and then geostationary or geosynchronous orbit out at around the 36,000 kilometer mark, plus or minus a few hundred kilometers. And of course, beyond that, we have what's known as the graveyard orbits, which are orbits at which they put geosatellites to bed at the end of their mission, hopefully. Also added to this orbits called highly elliptical, highly elliptical, highly eccentric orbits, which actually pass through all orbital regimes in their path, depending on what they're designed to do. The benefits we get from all these orbits are not limited to these, but generally Earth observation, utilized a lot in climate change, communications, very important, solar observation, and that is still a growing science. We do have a number of space telescopes out there, and of course there's the manned experimentation on the ISS, and hopefully more in the future. And of course, under that Earth observation, we get some significant support, such as weather forecasting, terrestrial weather forecasting. Something like 80% of our terrestrial forecasting, long-range forecasting, comes from space. And of course, we get that wonderful benefit called GPS, or GNSS as it should be, but GNSS being the international capabilities of the navigation systems, GPS being the US specific. But of that, that's really the known population. There's an estimation, depending on the models that you look at, of somewhere in the region of 750,000 of uncatalogued objects above 1 centimeter in size. There might be even more than that, but there's no agreed international model. And what we believe very much is we need to have more sensors doing more cataloging and tracking and detecting and tracking to make sure we actually fully understand what the issues might be. The current sensor technology capability is limited to anything greater than 10 centimeters, predominantly because it's based on the US space surveillance network, which actually is made up mostly of systems that are actually tasked to do other missions, such as missile warning, and therefore they're not optimized to do space surveillance and tracking. The new space fence, which has just come online, is supposed to reduce this down to as little as 1 centimeter in places, but of course having one sensor is not helpful. And of course, commercially, you have LEO labs who are tracking down to 2 centimeters with their system based in New Zealand. But we need, as a community, to improve the capability to truly begin the process of identifying and maintaining custody of all small objects and making it space operations more sustainable. Space surveillance and tracking, which is where my experience first began for the UK, is basically utilizing mostly ground-based systems, but there are the odd space-based tracking system as well. The UK has 2 LEO radars, RAF Fylingdales, so that is behind the military firewall, and it is a missile warning system. And then there's Chilbolton, which is a weather radar that can be repurposed to do space tracking. We have 3 optical systems, Starbrook, which is a commercial system based in Cyprus, Hurst&So, a NERC capability, and then Coates, which is a optical and infrared capability that has been trialed alongside Chilbolton. And then there's a laser ranging facility at Hurst&So as well, satellite laser ranging system, which is utilized to track cooperative targets, i.e. those that actually have reflectors on them. But the primary catalogue is maintained by the US with some assistance from commercial and international partners. And in fact, late last night and over tonight and through tomorrow, I'm supporting a US commercial military exercise called SAC-T to show how commercial space can support the US government mission. But this mission is maintained by about 50 internal personnel, mostly in the US military, and there is muted comments that this may transfer to the Department of Commerce, but until funds are available, it will stay firmly with the US Department of Defense. So what can we at NORSS provide? We have unprecedented operational orbital analysis experience. My partner in the business, Sean Goldsborough, for the past 15 plus years was originally an analyst at Fylingdales as a civilian analyst, and in more recent years was the orbital analyst for the UK Space Agency. He has joined the company, and we actually now provide an orbital analyst cell to UCSA, which is directly supporting the Ministry of Defence. We carry out space surveillance and tracking research and development and operations, and we provide consultancy support for the development of future space traffic management. With our linkages with Northumbria University, we're able to provide in-depth space law advice and develop policies and regulations to support that sort of thing. And then, of course, we will provide, if as and when required, analytical services to commercial industries as well as government and academia. And this is along the general lines of fragmentation analysis, re-entry predictions, conjunction analysis, collision avoidance, etc. And I'll use the phrase traditional space services, but we're looking about how we can do it better and develop it more so. And through the NORSS Orbital Analyst Hive, we're looking to develop an analyst development program. So we're working closely with New College, Durham, and eventually Durham University to actually start this September, if the situation eases, a orbital analyst apprenticeship. And the individual will do a data analyst level 4 apprenticeship at the college before foundational degree before moving on to astrophysics and then policy and law between Durham and Northumbria universities. And if we were successful this first year, then the plan is to have more as the years develop. So 1 this year, maybe 3 subsequent years to develop that greater understanding of the bigger picture in space, and to build experience, because a key element to understanding SSA, developing SSA, is actually the key element, is actually the experience of the individuals, and that takes in excess of 10 years to grow effectively. Over the short period of time that we've been in operations as a company, we've had a number of partnerships. On the left of my screen, X-Analytic, Northumbria University, ACCESS.SPACE, FairSpace, Gnosis, Saints, and Intel Fusion are our key partnerships. Gnosis is the global network on sustainability in space, a new SDFC-funded network that is providing research funds and part-funded PhDs to look at how we can better do SSA and support that. Saints is a Northeast-based networking conglomeration which first introduced me to intelligence fusion. And of course, you all know about ACCESS.SPACE. And then we've worked with government organisations such as DSTL and the UK Space Agency. We've worked within the UK Space Operations Centre, supporting ESA projects, and working with other northern consortiums to ensure that space is more infused across the country, not just focused in the south and southeast. And there's lots of programs that are ongoing right now, and I won't go into those sort of details. Certainly, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have on Northern Space and Security, on space situational awareness, either now or at the end of the presentations. And I'll open the floor now, really, Tony, if you have anything, or if anybody has any questions.
Yes, I thank you. Thank you so much, Dinz. Very nice presentation here. We do have a question from the attendees. I'm going to ask the person asking the question, Chuck Lower, to ask the question. I'm going to open up the microphone. Chuck, could you let me open up the microphone first for you, and then if you could present yourself, who you are and which company and where you're from. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, sorry, had to unmute. Yeah, hi, I'm Chuck Lauer with Rocket Plane. The big question on my mind is what will happen with 40,000 Starlink satellites? Is there any simulation or gaming that's happened about that much of a cloud of satellites in multiple LEO orbits and what that does to the rest of the space user community?
That is a very good question, and unfortunately well beyond my pay grade. The first stage of the Space Law Games is we're focusing on the GEO mission extension vehicle, and with a plan to move on to low Earth orbit, wargaming is the next stage of the journey. 40,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. The speculation has been immense online. The speculation, at least just amongst the astronomy community, particularly on the light pollution, has been interesting to read. And I think that was one thing that wasn't even thought of before the event. So my personal feeling is, unless we manage it properly, it's going to be catastrophic. Are we managing it properly? Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to answer that. Again, personal feeling is I don't think we are right now. I believe OneWeb, and this is a personal thought, OneWeb actually were approaching it in a sustainable manner and had done a lot of in-depth work on how their operational model will work. And personally, from what I see in the press, SpaceX is more of we'll throw up what we can and see how that affects, which is obviously far more risky. There's been little to instill confidence in me to date.
Okay, I have another question. Thank you, Chuck. From Bruno. Bruno, I'm gonna get you on the microphone if you can present yourself as well. Just give me a couple of seconds to find you on the screen. Okay, Bruno, you're on.
Hi, hello. I'm Bruno Carvalho. I'm working with the Orbit. I'm managing the office in Portugal. The Orbit is an Italian-based company, actually in the region of Lombardy. We also opened up an office in the UK late last year, so we also now operating in the UK, and we've been in touch with NORSS for a while. So what we're trying to achieve is to try to potentially integrate your data into our control system. I was asking about conjunctions, because one of the things is to have the information about the what's up there, but the other thing is to do something with it. And I was wondering if there's, well, first potentially an area of cooperation there, but also what kind of service you provide with that data. Do you provide the added value of generating the alerts necessary to see, okay, there's a foreseen event in the foreseeable future, what kind of measures should we take to avoid those potential collisions? Thanks.
It's typical, isn't it? I get a phone call and a quiet day in the office and nothing comes through on the phone, and then all of a sudden, as soon as I'm online, people start ringing me like there's no tomorrow. Yeah, so we can add value to conjunction analysis. At the moment, the main people that provide that support are the 18th Space Control Squadron, and they still provide the vast majority of data available to support conjunction analysis, because they still have the richest network of sensors. And we have a Stratcom agreement, so we can actually reach in and take some of that weight off of their ever increasing workload. And so we can actually support operators specifically. We all have experience of working within the European Union Space Surveillance and Tracking Program as well, and they add a lot of value to conjunction analysis, certainly utilizing Kinesis software, Jacques and Caesar. The main value added that we can apply to it right now is the dedicated focus to, if we are contracted to support a company, then that's the job we're doing. If you're utilizing either EUSST or US government, they obviously have other priorities, and unless that conjunction is highly likely to happen, they'll be focusing on all the other roles and missions they have. So yeah, initially at the moment, the added value is the fact you get the focus and expertise, and we're developing algorithms which need to be tested and tried. We have access to other sensors, and we're developing our own sensors. At the end of the day, the more data one gets on an object, the more accurate data one gets, the more accurate the conjunction analysis is going to be, and we're limited by the number of sensors. Hopefully we can actually add more to that, and it's the revisit rate more than anything else that needs to be brought into the civil commercial space realm, having sensors that can actually track these objects on a more regular basis. But yeah, we've met with the Orbit mostly on the phone. And a colleague and friend of mine, I think has just started working for you in the UK as well. And more than happy to sit down and specifically go through conjunction analysis with you on your requirements for the orbit anytime in the future.
Thank you, Dinz. There are two people on the mobile phone. I don't know who they are. They are proper attendees, of course. I would like to ask you, if you'd like to ask questions, just send me an email at tony@access.space. And then at the end of the three panelists, I can call on you to ask the question. If you have any questions, just email them to me, and then we'll get you on to ask them at the end. Okay, we're gonna now move on to Natasha. So Dinz, if you can take off your video, then we have Natasha to make her presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dinz. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good, great, fabulous. Well, Tony, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to talk to you briefly about the story behind Multiply. Some of you may know about us or a little bit about what we do, but this is a story about why we do it and where we've come from. Have a bit of a look at the work we've done, who we're working with, and a glimpse into how we do it, so the structure and the framework. And obviously at the end, I'd like to leave a good amount of time for any questions, but as we go through, asking the attendees to sort of have a think in context of how does technology transfer and commercial technology transfer programs, how could that support their growth strategy? So I founded Multiply in 2015. Prior to that, I was working in the digital sector, primarily FTSE 100, financial services, insurance, energy, and leading strategy and propositions, and was very actively involved in the fintech growth as well. So very familiar with rapid innovation, very quick prototype development and disruption in market. And in 2015, I got a call inviting me to come and play with rocket cars, which of course I had to say yes to. And I joined the British Land Speed record team, and they were my first client as Multiply. And when I first had a look at the Bloodhound supersonic car, and you look at the aerodynamics and material technology, the end systems engineering, the rocketry, I saw the enormous amount of value residing in the technology that could be, if you just look at it slightly differently, look at it laterally, that could be commercialized for application in new markets, for new applications and through new models. And that's the birth point of Multiply. If I just take us back a little bit, I mean, the big picture for me is a huge follower and fan of space right from the beginning. And when we look back in 1971 with Black Arrow and Prospero, we're talking of 50 odd years ago now. And where we are, what has happened in those 50 years, and we look back at that original program, yes, there wasn't a market need like there is today, but there was also a high government dependency. Harold Wilson came in with a new government and asked the program to stop. Of course, the button was pressed, which we're all happy about, but the program was stopped. So it's about, when I saw that, and I saw fantastic moonshot programs, how can we bring these brilliant ideas to life and make them commercially sustainable? So we're all about creating commercially sustainable industries. In order to do that, we need to underpin it with commercially sustainable companies. So after Bloodhound, we moved on and was co-founder of a company called LenaSpace, developing turbo machinery for small sat launch vehicles. And it's only been the past 18 months that Multiply has evolved from a single client model business to multiple clients. And we work not as a consultancy, but as a program partner, as a venture developer with our clients. Now, consultancy part is part of the progress, but I'll go into a little bit more about how we work in a minute. So just sort of going back slightly to the building these commercially sustainable companies using technology transfer, we look to identify new commercial revenue opportunities. We look to identify new models that could absolutely maximize the revenue on existing pipelines, about positioning our customers in global supply chains, it's critical suppliers, and also very important, in particularly in today's environment, looking at how we can de-risk our customers from disruption, be it societal, economic, government, or new startups coming through. And by taking a lateral approach, by focusing on technology transfer as a capability, a core capability in your business, you are de-risking as well as opening up opportunities for growth. And as we sort of hone down, it all comes back to sort of our core mission, which you can see on this page, about unleashing the potential of technology to multiply value. And we realized over 30 million worth of value opportunities with public funding, direct customer purchases and funding, as well as partnerships and licensing agreement in the past 5 years. And we're continuing on that trend. And I think, as you can see, there's a few of the customers that we've worked with at the bottom of the screen. But sort of to give you an idea of the sort of projects we work on, we've taken heat transfer technology from rocket engines and been able to transfer it into electric vehicles. We've taken, rocket engine pumps and being able to put it into firefighting applications. We're looking at spinning in robotics capability from the nuclear sector into space application, be it for exploration or in orbit servicing and manufacturing. And we're looking at Earth observation and AI applications for biodiversity as well. So it's a really broad set of programs, and we have a very distributed resourcing model. So we bring in absolute skills and expertise as required. We're a relatively small team of 5, but and with a view to obviously grow that out. But that's what allows us to make sure that we can work across transport, across energy, financial services, all the other sectors, by bringing and working with the right expertise at the right time. So a little bit into how we do it. Actually, I'll tell you a bit more about one of the customers that we've got. So you're probably all familiar with reaction engines. We did a 9-month program with them, and initially we started off with our strategic consultancy piece. We're developing their applied technology strategy approach and the operational setup to support that. What's very interesting about tech transfer and about commercial innovation is there is never a lack of ideas. There's always ideas. The biggest problem is prioritizing that, and we'll go into the model where this is where it's absolutely key, and we can support very highly focused business decision making. So we worked with them on that and followed on that program by taking their technology into the automotive market. We realized a mix of public and customer end user funding within 3 months of 6 figures for that. And again, we continued on in a new project form with them, which was exploring how we could leverage it for large energy infrastructure programs. So we were engaging with OEMs and EPCs globally, and I'm aware that there is an ongoing discussion with one of them. So it gives you a bit of a flavor of what we can do. So this is a glimpse at how we work. As I mentioned earlier, we're not just a consultancy. What's important to us is about realizing tangible value. So this is about going all the way through to taking a product to market, to securing that funding, even to running that program through. It's about building long-term relationships. Then naturally, as part of that, there is consultancy right at the outset. We need to understand what direction to go in, why to go into it, and should we even be doing it in the first place. But it isn't a pure consultancy. We're about building and taking programs to market. We're about building new ventures, new spin-outs, and new innovations. So when we look at the framework, this is a bespoke framework that we've developed over the past 7 years, actually. And it's based on design thinking, bringing in learning from the digital sector, but making it applicable for technology transfer. When I talk about technology transfer, I'm not just referring to upstream hardware. We're also focused very strongly on downstream opportunities as well. And the first 2 phases in the framework, mine and manage, we run as a core product, which is our initial setup, tech transfer setup and plan product, where we will, in a 6 to 8 week business sprint, take our customers from an idea, a concept, a thought, an inquiry into tech transfer to exactly what can be done, how it should be done, and why it should be done, and what the value opportunity is. It is basically a business plan light around that. Phases 3 and 4 is the make and mature, and this is where we continue to work with our customers to take the program through bidding, through program leading. So we're taking the weight off of the project management and often the resource limitation that comes with doing tech transfer by putting that on us, leaving you guys to do what you're brilliant at, which is the jobs and the products. We do the heavy lifting around the project management and the commercial piece. And then we've also got a third pillar, which is about incubating ideas. So these can be ideas from scratch. So we're working on one program at the moment, which is leveraging AI and Earth observation data for a biodiversity species identification and mapping program. We're doing that as part of a large collaborative program. We're also working with a company who's spinning out from an FMCG organization they successfully founded 20 years ago, and spinning out to apply that capability into defense and security as well. And that is about building a new venture. So as you can see, we go all the way from core consultancy piece, core program leading, and then into venture building as well. And this is the framework that underpins it. There is a lot more in terms of the toolbox and capability, and this is something I'm hoping to, over this period, as companies are starting to look at how do we rebuild, how do we grow when we come out of this lockdown period, to hopefully be able to provide some of these online for people to access and use and get support from as well. So I think that's really sort of gives you a little bit of a flavour of the story behind Multiply, who we are, a little bit of a look at the work we've done and how we do it. So I'd like to open up the floor to any questions anyone has, and look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Okay, thank you so much, Natasha. I will now, I have a question here from the floor, from Pier Paolo. And let me just find Pier Paolo on the list, and he can ask the question directly to you.
Great.
Okay. Okay. Pier Paolo, you are on the microphone now. If you can present yourself.
Can you hear me, Natasha?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Question is, are you more interested or aiming at multiplying revenues or values? By that I mean, are you more interested in actually taking a technology from a company which is highly specialized, reasonably big, and find alternative markets, or are you more interested in actually augmenting the value of a company which is not so big through creating something which is more disruptive?
It's twofold. It's a really good question point. So majority we've done to date is about revenue building. So it's taking technology, be it at a component or full system level, and looking at new markets, new applications. And so it's about creating new revenue streams. We also recently completed a program with a global sensor company looking at a new business model and how to absolutely sweat the value of their existing asset. So that was growth of an existing revenue stream. In terms of that value to a company, it's a very good point, because some of the work we've done, there is a natural halo effect. So be it demonstration through innovation, building a broader ecosystem, positioning themselves for investment, etc. So there are a lot of soft ancillary value creation pieces that we do focus on, and some companies have asked. We've done one program which is specifically looking at building their position, their brand, their value position, their value offering, with a view to going for investment. But primarily, I always come back to what makes sustainable industries, what makes sustainable businesses is about creating commercial entities. And that's why we focus on revenue generation.
Thanks, Natasha. Thank you very much. We're going to have more Q&As at the end. We're going to move on now to David from OMS.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I'm going to get David on the video, and then David, if you could share your screen. David is joining us from the United States, the Mountain Time Zone, I understand. But present yourself, David, and then you can start. Thank you.
Hi there. Give me just a second. I'm hoping you're seeing my screen.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to you guys. But by the way, happy Earth Day. This is the 50th anniversary. Strange times we live in. So just to get into this fairly quickly, Orbital Microsystems was founded in 2015. We are I'd have to call us we're a data company. We're not a satellite company. We build the satellites, we build the sensors, we do the engineering, but our main focus is to get the data down off the satellite, process it, and deliver it to customers. Most of our data is very weather-centric. However, we are dealing with other sensors as well. So let me just step forward here. So if you can see this, let me get it. I want to talk just a little bit about what passive microwave. A lot of people think we're cooking something in space. No, passive microwave is it can be best thought of like a radar, except it's a very three-dimensional thing. The Earth is the emitter in this case, and we have a passive receiver in space. So this was Super Typhoon Hagibis. You can see, if you look at the blue areas in this thing, in this picker image, those areas of cold downdraft. So that's where the storm is the most intense. You can see near the eye, you can see several other outlying storms. If you look down to the lower right, you can actually see a bit of a three-dimensional view. Our satellites have two frequencies at 118 and 183 gigahertz and 24 channels. So we're actually able to slice through the storm as a sounder and an imager together. So we build a three-dimensional view of what's going on inside a storm or inside any kind of a weather event. Our first satellite was launched, again, with UK Space and Capabilit from the space station on the 19th of July. And it's been successfully operating ever since. We're still getting a lot of good data, and we're planning to put up quite a number more of these. So again, just looking at the data, you're seeing basically this is a level 1C product, which means you're just seeing really brightness temperatures here. But we can process this information into things like precipitation, humidities, surface temperatures, all the rest. The target, and this is where it gets really interesting, is initially to do sub-hourly, which is 6 to 12 times better than anything you can get from any other source. And if the market demands it, we can go all the way to 15-minute updates. So the idea is to go cover every point on Earth as often as every 15 minutes. And we're then building a very high-speed processing chain to get this data off the satellite, get it down, get it processed, and get it to end users so they can actually do something with it. So that's our focus. Come on now. So we are looking at trying to get up, and if you look in the upper right there, you can see an idea of the orbital paths we're planning to put these things. These are going to be a semi-randomized GPS type orbits, low Earth orbit. But this is a 24/7 operation. And we will be level 1, level 2, level 3 atmospheric profiles and imagery. So a lot of what we're trying to get to is what we're calling nowcasting of this data. You know, a weather forecast 12 hours ago is not very helpful if you're an aircraft flying across the Pacific. It's not very useful if you're trying to be concerned about a cold front coming in that's going to affect your crops. So what we're all about is get that information, get it down. So get that decision making. And we're very focused on working with the existing analytic base. We don't want to go build all the analytics. There are a slew of companies who have already developed analytics for various companies. So we want to work with them, get this data to them as fast as possible. So this is all being done in the Amazon cloud. It's easy to get to it. They can stand up their own analytics engine next to the data and avoid all the egress charges. So we're getting, again, this is both a sounder and an imager together, creating, again, 24 slices. So you can think of, you can see the surface. You can then go up 1,000 meters and get another slice, 1,000 meters, so on and so forth, all the way up to about 40 kilometers. So this gives you a little idea of the kind of thing we're looking at. And if you can see my mouse here, we're operating these first two satellites will be operating at the 118 and 183. And these are basically window channels through the atmosphere. So how you can think of this is, for example, at 118, the current satellite, if you're sitting right at 118, you're going to be high in the atmosphere. If you come just slightly, ever so slightly off that, however, you drop down immediately and massively to lower altitudes. So if you get down to about 118 plus or minus 8 gigahertz, you're actually at the surface. So this graphic just gives you an idea that there are other window channels out there. We may be exploring those as well at some point down the road. But there's times when you're trying to, what are you trying to see? What do you want to know in the atmosphere? So this gives you a little idea of what that's about. So this is the GEMS satellite, and GEMS is the Global Earth Monitoring System. And this is it's a dual band, again, 24 total channels. We have a 16-kilometer resolution. And you can, this is actual data again from the satellite here. 1,600 kilometers. We can see humidity profiling, precip. Again, we have vastly improved temporal and spatial resolution over anything that exists via anything from ESA, NASA, NOAA, Japan, Russia. We will have more satellites with, again, the higher resolution. The purpose of this information is not for government. It's for business. That's who we're really trying to get this out to, is to get that kind of information in a much more timely manner. Low latency is what we're all about. So right here in the upper right, that's actually the satellite being launched off the space station. This next is the payload, and this image is of the entire satellite with our payload sitting down at the bottom. This bus was built by Clyde Space out of Glasgow. And again, just to give you a little idea of what the difference between visible light and this, or infrared for that matter. Here you can see a storm up in the Northern Territories. And you can see there's a massive clouds here. You can see a massive clouds there, but what's actually going on inside of those? You can actually see some smoke coming off of some of the fires that were going down around Brisbane and what have you. But what I really want to point out to you is, whoops, is the storm sitting right here. You can see from vis and infrared, you see cloud top information. You can get a sounder, but only in clear air. If you're trying to know what's going on in the storm, that's kind of not terribly useful. So what typically happens over terrestrial areas where it exists, you combine this with radar to get a nice view of what's going on. However, if you're in Southeast Asia, if you're in large portions of Africa, if you're anywhere over the ocean, which after all is 70% of the planet, there's virtually no radar and there's no information available. So here you can see that same storm, and you can see the storm cells, and you can see we're getting a lot of significant downdrafts from a fairly massive storm and exactly where that storm is happening. You can also see some of the smoke coming off over here to the right of what's going on. This was, again, this was December of 19. So this is a little comparison of what the best available right now is what you're seeing on the left. And you're looking at a storm coming in. And those three boxes here are basically cross sections through the storm. And what you're not seeing is, because the data is not being recorded often enough, we're just not getting the kind of latency. You're not actually seeing what's going on in the storm to actually be able to make a decent prediction of what's going on or to say what's happening. On the right is what the GEMS data would look like, and gives you an idea, because at 15 minutes, you're actually recording data at the rate that the weather actually is changing. So we actually see how the storm is evolving. And this leads to much improved forecast, much improved, even trying to tell where the storm is going, and the dynamics of what's happening within those storms is now all but plainly visible. So the US military has taken a very strong interest in what we're doing. These are just some of the quotes from the Air Force and the US Naval Research Laboratory, who has actually done an evaluation of the data already that's come down and has been extremely pleased. They have said we currently have the best sensor out there on the market from any source. And keep in mind, this satellite is the first commercial passive microwave satellite ever put on orbit. But again, high value proposition to these organizations, especially people like the Joint Typhoon Weather Center. But there are obviously lots of other markets beyond these folks. The other issue that comes up with this kind of data, and this is the common problem, I've been doing remote sensing for 40 years. And one of the challenges is, gee, I want to just take a couple of data sets from two sources. I'd like to put them together so I can actually try and figure something out. The data is never in the same format, because every data set that seems to be put up there is done by a different science team who uses a different format, different projection, different datum, different whatever. Trying to do this takes far too long. This is where the whole idea of ARD is coming around, the analytics ready data, meaning, gee, can I actually put these two data sets together, ask the question, get an answer? So we're trying to solve that problem as well, because our data is best used when it's enhanced with other data sets. So to give you an idea of how ICE is trying to do this, we'll have the GEM satellites, we'll see the observations, we'll pull the data down, we'll downlink it, we'll process in the Amazon cloud and get deliverables out. So we can get those products out very event, something that can operate much, much faster than the current set of models that normally can only run once an hour. I'm hoping you can still hear me. My internet is flaking out a little bit up here.
Oh, you came back now.
Okay.
Maybe if you can repeat the last 1 minute. We missed the last 1 minute. Oh, 30 seconds.
Okay, this is how the data will come down off the satellite. Is we have the acquisition, we see the data, we process the data, we downlink it, and we produce our various products. We also produce something called weather alerts, which is a much faster way to find weather events that are anomalous or unusual for a given area, so that we can provide this information again to marine traffic, air traffic, farmers, disaster planners, these sorts of folks. So ICE, which is the International Center for Earth Data, is really designed to pull all this data together, align it with other private and public sources, and get it down and process it as fast as possible, actually significantly faster than what most of the government entities can do. We've been told, and actually up at the numerous conferences where we've said, insurance companies have said to us, look guys, we can't wait 3 days for the data. We've got to be writing checks in 5 days. We've had NGOs saying, people are going to die if you can't get us this information in hours. As it is now, 6 to 12 hours is just unacceptable. We're ready to pay to get what we need, but you've got to get us what we need when we need it. So our whole thing is, again, work with these other entities, get this data, get it organized so that people can pick it up and use it. Another project we're working on is a joint venture we formed called the Soil Moisture Company. And we're taking basically P and L bands, putting it on, these are sensors we've already built and are now flying. And we can get as good as 5-meter resolution of L-band radar and can see down 5 to 10 centimeters in the soil and see what's actually going on, how dry are the conditions. So we can fly these types of sensors as need be. So what are we going after in terms of what is ICE trying to deliver through the, stop that now, sorry, go back. ICE is really going after the transportation, agriculture, government, and risk management are our primary sectors. So you kind of go, well, why would insurance be interested in this? Obviously, there's things, for example, catastrophe bonds market, which is rather large. In terms of cities take on insurance to determine if they're going to be, what their risk and cost are going to be in the event they should be hit by a major storm, a snowstorm, a flood, what have you. So they take on these catastrophe bonds, and those bond markets are traded evenly. And so if we can predict and say when a storm is going to hit and give them a little more advanced warning, that can hugely affect the price of those bonds. Government, I think I covered that. Agriculture, again, lots of things going on in terms of providing weather and agriculture, but the transportation, the flights, all the rest are, again, major customers we're trying to get to. So the business model is really based on, again, getting the right data to the customer at the right time. For our investors, we're saying, look, guys, you're going to put in a certain amount of money. We're going to produce satellites that are then going to get data. We're going to process that data and build nowcast weather from that and produce value to the investor. But beyond this, there is the aspect of we are building probably the world's best climate model ever seen by man. We're going to be able to see, like I say, initially hourly, sub-hourly, the entire planet as it's evolving, see what's going on in the entire atmosphere from surface to 40 kilometers plus. And be able to model that and see what's actually happening over land and sea to really get an understanding of what's happening, where it's happening, what's the rate of change, this type of thing. So as that data becomes archived, we're going to start making that data available to researchers as well. So this gives you just a little idea of the background of the folks involved with this thing. We've got a variety of experiences. The team is a fairly solid bunch of characters who've come together to get this stuff all to happen. And just to close out here, basically, we are completely uniquely positioned to do this. There's nobody else that can offer what we're offering. at the price point we're trying to offer it at. So please visit our website if you have any other questions. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
So thank you so much, David. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question from the audience. It's an anonymous question. So I'm going to read it out. How does your sensor resolution compare to GPS RO technology, such as Spire and Planet IQ use?
Okay. Let's see. The best way to, as you can see, this is a swath type data. GPS RO provides points at 50-kilometer resolution. So while it provides a very high vertical profile, it provides almost nothing horizontally. At 50-kilometer resolution, it has some limited capability. The other major issue with GPS RO is it only goes down to about 20 kilometers. You can't see the surface. So where a lot of the activity is of aircraft in that sub 20-kilometer range, you're not going to get any data. Now, merging GPS RO with the passive microwave data would be highly valuable. But as a standalone, these are completely different data sets. They're looking at different parameters. They're looking at, again, this is an imager sounder as opposed to GPSR, which is only a sounder. The other issue with GPSRO that's a challenge is that it is opportunistic, meaning that the GPS satellite and the sensor have to line up exactly in order to get a reading over the limb of the Earth. So if your storm happens to be a few degrees off, you'll not get a reading over the storm, where a scanner like we're showing actually collects everything. So we will see that storm every few minutes. Any other questions?
So I don't have any more questions from the audience. I'm going to now open up we finished the panel in the sense that we all of you three have done marvelous 3 presentations. Also, let me say that William, Bill Hossack wasn't able to make it today, and David volunteered at the last minute to make his presentation. And thank you so much for that, for this very quick turnaround, David. We'll have William in the near future at another presentation, another webinar. I do have someone from the audience, Pier Paolo, who's raised his hand. Let me find him and give him the microphone. You might want to ask a question. Let me just find.
Yeah, I should have probably raised my hand earlier. I have a question for David, and it's mostly my probably ignorance, really. What is the uniqueness? Is the type of sensor? Is the type you actually process the data somehow? I understand basically you're gathering a lot of information, which is extremely useful very, very quickly. And you can also integrate the data.
Right.
But what is the uniqueness? What is what differentiates you? I don't quite understand.
Well, for example, the Chinese FY3C data is collecting data at 30 kilometers. We're collecting data at twice the resolution and ultimately about 36 times the temporal resolution. There is nobody else in the commercial sector offering this data.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it unique. The quality of the data, again, makes it unique, but it's the whole idea of now creating a data source which can operate over the ocean, over land, simultaneously to gather that type of information. They can often, in much of the developing world, could actually replace a lot of the radar. You fly over Southeast Asia and there is major dark areas where there is no information at all. Believe it or not, in the 21st century, airline pilots are flying out as soon as they get within about 150 kilometers offshore. They have nothing but the radar on their airplanes, which can see all of about 10 minutes ahead of what they're flying. Can you imagine if we could actually get them the information into that aircraft and actually let them know what's happening in front of them? This could save tremendous amounts of fuel provide passenger safety, those sorts of things. So there is nothing out there doing this right now.
David, I clearly see the business opportunity and the business advantages and the uniqueness. And also, I understand that you are, in fact, in a unique position. I like to understand, let's put it this way, how easily or difficult could be for someone else to catch up with you because of the technology you're using. That's all.
The passive microwave community is actually extremely tiny. And our chief scientist, Dr. Algazeski, has actually taught and built most of the instruments used that are anything similar to this. So I would argue it would take 4 to 5 years, plus the severe barrier of entry to actually build and launch a spacecraft. Mm-hmm. Our designs and architecture, we have miniaturized our hardware down where we can build and launch the spacecraft build, launch, and operate for about 1.2 million per spacecraft. Compare that to anything that NASA, NOAA, ESA, or anybody else does. There you're talking launch, operate, and all the rest in the $500 to $1 billion range.
Yeah. No,
so that's what makes us unique. It's only because we can do this so cheaply we can afford to put up 14 or 15 to 50 of these.
And you do both the satellite and the data processing, of course.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pier Paolo. I'd like now to open the Q&A for everyone. Can you put on your video, the 3 panelists? Natasha and also Dinz as well. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. One from Betty. I'm going to ask Betty to ask the question and also to present herself and ask the question for Natasha. Okay. Betty, the microphone is on now.
Good afternoon. Thank you all 3 for the very interesting presentations. Natasha, I have a more specific question for you about the transfer on technology. How easy do you see transferring technologies from space to other sectors, and which sectors do you see are more likely to accept space technologies? Thank you.
No, thank you. Really poignant question. I didn't sort of go into the core industry. So typically we refer to a sort of a group of industries as sort of advanced engineering. So these are companies, can be both software and hardware capability, but these are companies that have high regulations, working in extreme environments, so very used to high precision engineering a lot of the time and solutions. So we work across 5 core, spinning in and out of space. It's transport is a key one. Defense and security is another one. Aerospace, understandably. When we talk of transport, we also incorporate automotive as well as a sort of a core sector in that, and energy. Now that does go beyond, as I mentioned, we're working with a company that was a FMCG focused originally, who are looking at spinning in primarily into defense and security. And we also had an initial consultation with a company that was going from media, so video data processing, who are interested in spinning into space. So it can be much broader than that, but the majority of the time it works across what we refer to as those advanced engineering sectors. Does that answer your question?
Let me just check.
Thank you. Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Natasha. So let me, I have a couple more questions here as well for Dinz, but also there were people actually on the phone, on the mobile phone. If you would like to ask a question, could you send me an email, please? And then if you have a question, I will allow you to talk. But let me, in the meantime, ask you a question, Dinz. You mentioned on your presentation space law and your involvement with Northumbria University. and the ACCESS.SPACE Alliance also is getting involved with space law and also debris and so on. And also I have particular interest as I also studied air and space law myself. Could you tell us a little bit more about this involvement of yourself, your company, with the universities on the space law project? Thank you.
Certainly. We work very closely with Professor Chris Newman, Professor of Space Law at the Law Faculty of Northumbria University. And it's through him that we sponsored a PhD student who is developing the core elements of the Space Law Games. Space Law Game is designed to utilize the questions within space law to help generate I suppose it's a gap analysis, really, of what capabilities we have now to support current operations, because many of us will argue that space law isn't being applied particularly well right now, and to look at what the future requirements might be. And no matter how light a touch space traffic management might become, it will still require certain technologies and certain legal paradigms to support it. So the first stage is the first part of the journey is a GEO event centering around a mission extension vehicle type scenario. So the one that's just successfully played out in GEO from October last year through to last week. But then going on beyond that and something occurring just not long after the satellite's back in orbit that involves a third party. I mean, the whole thing is driven by the question of space of the Iridium Cosmos scenario and why there was no legal challenge after that event. So we're involving additional parties. The whole idea is to run a complex scenario at Northumbria University this summer. We're still heading for the end of June, early July in which to run that, involving regulators, operators, insurance brokers, and insurance companies, and SSA practitioners. And the evidence that's drawn from that is then put together to actually run a moot court, which would, giving the students enough time to gather the evidence, the moot court will start probably January next year if the scenario happens in the summer. And in between those two periods, we'll start Space Law Journey number 2, which would be using a complex scenario around a active debris removal mission. The plan was to do that based on active debris removal amongst a deploying low Earth mega constellation, if I'm allowed to use the phrase mega constellation, and the effects that might have. Reason we went for GEO first is it's effectively low hanging fruit. We know that there is more data available on GEO objects than there is on LEO objects at the moment. So it was good to prove the concept before getting even more complex. We find that every time we add a new element or even just turn a new corner, it gets more and more complex. So certainly taking a lot of time, very enjoyable journey to take. And then the idea is to present all the results on as open a forum as possible in the future.
Thank you, Dinz. I have a question for the three of you, and answer it as you may wish, and maybe even together. How are you coping with the current situation with the COVID? I mean, we are at ACCESS.SPACE initiated this initiative of webinars, I guess, to help the community out there, the space sector out there, also to spend some time with other people as they are working from home. People are not traveling anymore, are at home, and also they can't go, some of them cannot even go to work in their facilities, for example. Maybe one by one, starting from Natasha, if you could tell us your experience, and then David, and then Dinz as well, on how you are coping with the current situation of the lockdown, and when do you see this actually being relaxed and start moving around?
Okay, yeah, it's definitely been very interesting to watch the impact of the lockdown. Ironically, what's happening is the engagement and discussions are much sort of higher than the norm, and with potential clients, customers, partners, the ecosystem generally just interested to understand and discuss opportunities for growth and alternative tech transfer considerations. And I think that's partly people having stepped out of the work environment, stepped slightly away from their to-do lists. From our company point of view, we've honed it right down to some core client focus, but and reduced the team numbers down to a part-time in a number of scenarios to ensure that we can survive beyond the period. But one of the things we are doing during this time is, despite all of it, it does offer a space to really look at how we can support and put back in. I think I referenced it very briefly earlier. What we're working on is our proposition framework and toolkit, and to see how we can put that out and make that available to the space community to support their thinking around tech transfer strategy. So looking at that side of things, and being able to actually put some communications and support in the public environment. And that's how we're working on it. In terms of when this will be lifted, I avoid any sort of future forecasting generally as a rule. But I think the reality is return to normal as it was before isn't going to happen very soon, in fact, for probably quite a long time. So it's recognizing what is the adaptation as we move out of, not out, but towards the exit of it, and how is the work that we're doing can support it. We're lucky in that a lot of our work we can do remotely. We can, and it's all, which is fantastic, but only to a point. And that for us is our consideration of how do we ensure that we can do that engagement without having the face-to-face. And most of the time we can do it with video conference, but ultimately nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. So that's the reality from our side.
Thank you. David?
Surprisingly, we've had very little impact. We are a distributed company already, where most of our folks are. We've got people on the East Coast, the West Coast of the US. We have people in India. We've got people in Scotland. So we've been dealing with this type of thing for years anyway. When it comes to things like the actual construction of the payloads, this gets to be a little challenging. We had obviously clean rooms and whatnot that we can't get to. So just before everything shut down, we moved it to various people's apartments or homes. And so we have actually a guy in his apartment is actually soldering together the circuit boards and all the rest in his house. And then he sneaks it over to another guy's house who actually does the testing. To keep everybody on the same page, we have coffee hours. We have one coming up here in a half hour where we just get together and shoot the breeze. We have a tea time, we have happy hours. Our bigger challenge is some of our suppliers are starting to fade away or giving us delays. So trying to get some of our more precise components is getting to be a little challenging, although they're saying they are doing similar things to us. Because our components are quite small, these guys can still do them themselves. Hiring is the thing that's actually being a bit of a challenge as well. We're looking to hire new staff, and having those interviews and never actually being able to see the person and having no idea when they're actually going to be able to show up and have a meeting with them is a bit of an effort, but we're working through it. As to when this thing is going to end, we'll see a nice die down this summer. People will still be wandering around with masks and whatnot, I think, for some time, at least I hope so. I'm very fearful of a major return of this thing in the fall that could be much worse if you look at the Spanish flu of 1918, of what happened then. I think we've just, until we actually have a vaccine, this thing isn't going to be over. That's the reality.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, David. Dinz? On your side?
That's better. Unmute. In most elements, I got to echo about what both David and Natasha said, particularly about the fact that some parts of what we do need that face-to-face interaction. I'm actually finding as a small company that we as a company, because we're geographically separate, we do a lot of video conferencing anyway, so that's great. But of course, now that everybody wants to video conference, trying to be able to support all those different events is quite difficult, because people are finding actually the video conferencing is a lot easier than traveling somewhere and meeting up with people. And I think we'll tend to wait. Oh, right, I have an event at the end of the month, so I won't connect with this person until I get to that event type thing. So instead, I think it's increased the workload in some ways on the broader community. So that's a positive, but also has negative connotations about actually trying to keep the business rolling as well. It's certainly given us a time to do some inward development and thinking and understanding, and to really cement our foundations, which has been very helpful. But we are looking forward to more freedom of movement, so we can get out there and meet the customer more. And of course, it has slightly stifled our development of NOAA, because that was a new location. We just created it. We need to get the personnel in there working on the hardware. And although we can do a lot of the background work from our 3 locations, or 2 of our 3 locations right now, to get that development program off the ground, we need to be able to move more and travel more. So hopefully that will, the restrictions will start lifting fairly soon, and we'll be able to get NOAA moving a lot faster.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. In regards to hiring people, just let me tell you that there's a few people from my company, from OneWeb, that are out there actually looking for jobs. If you're interested to know who they are, and if you want to hire them, let me know. I can provide you with the details of who they are. Otherwise, the situation is what it is at the moment in London. We live in London, and we're still locked up at home. Although we can go out and take the dog out, or go for a small stroll at the near park. Let's say we can cope with it at the moment here. It's not the same as it is in Italy, for example, or France, where everybody has to have a specific reason to go out. In a way, we're lucky in that respect. I guess from the future, moving towards unlocking the situation, most likely, and I'm not the expert here, so don't take my advice as an expert. I'm not an expert, but I believe that using facial masks when you go out will most likely reduce also the contagious aspect of this kind of pandemic in a way. There is a poll which I launched about 3 or 4 minutes ago. If anybody would like to take a last minute, let's say, voting on this poll, then I'm going to end it. I've shown everyone the next week webinar. I'll share it with you again. We'll have 3 new companies presenting next week. So we're gonna have Nexafric, Amazon, and Valley Space presenting on the Wednesday, 29th of April. And then, as I have you on the slides, you'll see as well the other companies presenting a bit later in the week, a bit later in the month, beginning of then May and then June, who they are and what they're going to present in that respect. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and stop the poll. Where is it? If anybody's interested in the poll results, they're here on your screen now. Otherwise, thank you very much for your presentation, Natasha, David, and Dinz. I have recorded the webinar. I have your presentations. If you are able to share your presentation with people that would like to have them, let me know. And this will be shared with a PDF version, not a PowerPoint version. Just let me know if it's possible to share them. And I wish you good luck and happy continuations in your work. And also for the attendees, to thank the attendees. We had about 46 attendees today. And thank you very much for making this happen. I'm going to say goodbye now to everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much, Tony. See you again soon.
All the best. Take care.
See you next week. Bye.
Keep safe. Bye-bye.